He is a musician, a graduate from the University of New Mexico with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music, and is currently serving in the U.S. Navy as a professional saxophone player. Jared Goodrum is next on OTP.
And how you doing, Jared?
Doing good. How you doing?
All right, it's good to see you, son.
Good to see you too.
All right, for those that might be listening, you might have noticed that our guest today has the same name as the host, and he's my son, Jared Goodrum. And I'm glad to be talking to you today. Let's start out first, Jared, with your first memory of music, getting into music, wanting to play your instrument.
Well, the first memory of music at all I remember, funny enough, the two things I love, cars and music, I remember playing with my toy cars on the carpet and having the stereo go and listening to like Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder and Anita Baker. And while I was playing on the floor, probably 3 years old with, the little toys that I had. That's the earliest memory that I have of music. But another one that I know you tell the story to everybody, which was when I was older, is when I, which I still do to this day, is, whistling to whatever song that came on the radio. I obviously I went with you. I would always be tagging along with you when you would go run errands. We would be listening to the smooth jazz station. So I had a lot of practice to listen to the same song over and over and over again. So I'd be whistling along with that. And then, so I think I already was developing my ear without really realizing that I was developing my ear, because they would play the same songs over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was going to mention, we would do family trips,
Mm-hmm.
and you would sit behind me, and I remember just telling Mom that he's humming in the key. He always had a good ear.
Mm-hmm.
And so what made you want to go? Because I have a memory of wanting to get you on tuba.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, you tried to get me on everything but saxophone is what you tried to do. Because I remember trying to play tuba, and I remember trying to play trumpet, and I remember trying to play trombone. And those instruments, frankly, are a lot harder than saxophone. So saxophone's a lot easier than those instruments.
Yeah. Those were good times. Now, talk a little bit about your love for music and at that point in your life, because I'm trying to direct you toward, as you decided to make a choice to go into music, but your love for music, how it grew.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to articulate because it's such an abstract thing. That's not something that you can really touch, or it's not a finite type of thing to talk about. So it's really hard to articulate. But there was just a feeling of whenever we would watch, like one of the earliest memories was watching like the Grammys and watching Stevie Wonder, or like especially watching live performances. I remember that was probably one of the biggest pivotal moments for me as a kid, like a little kid, watching live performances a lot, watching Anita Baker or Luther Vandross or Stevie Wonder or perform live. We would watch DVDs. I remember watching Bela Fleck, and seeing them perform was just those cliche of like, I knew that's what I wanted to do because of the feeling I got watching them. It was so entertaining, and I thought what they were doing was so impressive, even as a little kid, and I didn't understand what was happening. And I thought that what I was listening to was so just unbelievable. Like, it was just like nothing else. So I knew I wanted to do that when I would watch a lot of live performances on TV. It spoke to me more than anything else. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Did the music have any influence on you on the selection of your instrument? Did the music have any influence on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the watching. I was really into guitar players. Funny enough, like I love Jimi Hendrix, and the DVD of us watching Bela Fleck. I forgot which DVD that was, but him on the banjo, and I was into even John Mayer when I got older, and classic rock, listening to Led Zeppelin and Leonard Skinner, and a lot of classic rock stuff. I loved guitar, but for whatever reason, when I started playing saxophone, it didn't ever occur to me like, oh, I should switch to guitar, or I should learn a different instrument. I think the reason why I love saxophone so much, even at a younger age, before I realized it, was because it did seem already, I could tell that it was something that could blend with anything. I could blend with a guitar, I could play piano lines, or I could play trumpet lines, or I didn't feel limited by saxophone,
Right.
which I think is a very common thing when you play guitar and other things. You can't. I think saxophone is one of the most, besides like drums, maybe, right, that can change shape
Yeah.
to fit with a vocalist, to anything. So watching, it was more, I started playing saxophone first, and then when I would watch things or listen to things, I was like, oh, that would sound interesting on saxophone. It was kind of that thought process.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. What was the feeling you had as you started developing your instrument and your voice on the instrument, as you started to get into high school and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, it's funny because I remember, for those listening, my dad was my first band director in middle school. So I remember being in sixth grade, playing saxophone and listening to the jazz band, and seeing the kids improvise. I remember going, playing in the concert, and the seventh graders and eighth graders would come out after the sixth graders would perform, and seeing them improvise. And I mean, I was kind of a cocky little kid. I would hear them improvise, and I would go, I feel like I could do a little bit better. I feel like I can do this a little bit better. Like, I don't know how, because obviously I didn't know exactly yet what they were doing, but I was like, I already had the urge to want to express myself. And then as time went on, I get into seventh grade, and you taught me the blues scale, and already, I was already hungry. I remember we had the Standard of Excellence CDs.
Yeah.
And I was excited about that, because you take home the CD and you play along with the CD, and I loved it. It wasn't practicing to me. It was just having fun and trying to express myself on something that was brand spanking new at the time. So I was playing along with it already and going like, wow, this is unbelievable. Like, this is so much fun.
Yeah. And that leads me to this question about improvisation. I mean, I remember that you and I had that conversation about playing by ear and reading, and we got to give props to your high school band director, Mr. Tyler North.
Very much so.
One of the best directors here in Albuquerque, and if not the state.
Yes.
And so we talk a little bit about that experience of your playing by ear, and then versus getting into that reading that you needed.
Yeah, that was a hard transition, because it's funny. I'm in the Navy now, and I've talked to a lot of different musicians about their journey, about how they learn music, and vocalists, guitar players. A lot of vocalists and guitar players will learn by ear, and I don't think it's as scrutinized as it is for an instrumentalist, like for other instrumentalists, like trumpet players, sax players, because the way through, at least through in New Mexico, the way through the band program is a little bit more rigid in terms of what is required of you. So I learned playing saxophone by ear, and that was the number one way I learned. And I remember sitting in your band class and couldn't read anything, but I would wait for, shout out to Dennis Weiss. He was a reader. He could really read really well, and he could improvise. And he would play it first, and then I would hear him, and then I would play it after him. And that got me through 3 years of middle school. You know? And then, so to answer your question, getting into high school was, you know, where I was coming from, the big leagues, especially because Sandia High School was, I think the, you know, early to mid 2000s, even late 90s, Mr. Fessinger had built up a super strong program. There were monsters coming out of Sandia. They had gotten high ratings at festival, and I mean, they were still a powerhouse when I was freshman year of high school.
Sure.
And what they were a powerhouse of was reading. Like, their wind ensemble was the creme de la creme, you know, strong, you know,
sure,
program. And their jazz band was too, but both of them were sight reading. They were sight reading all the time. Mm. And I remember freshman year, I got into freshman year, and even when there was nothing to really do, if we had finished festival or whatever, we were going to sight read some new music, and it was going to be in 5/8 or 13 something, or it was going to be switching meters, whatever. And I would just fold every single time. Right. And I hated Mr. North, frankly, because he was always yelling at me in freshman year to get to read. And I was always getting chewed out, and I was always getting yelled at, and I was always, you know, stepping in holes, as we say in the musician world, where that means, you know, when there's a rest, when nobody's supposed to play, I would play because I wasn't reading the music correctly. Right. So I was a mess freshman year, but it was exactly what I needed as much as I hated it. Right. Because it got my reading chops up and up and up and up and up. And Mr. North would push that. And by senior year, I still think to this day, it might be rose-colored glasses, but I think even to this day, the best sight reading I've ever been in my life was senior year of high school. Wow. I remember reading 7/8 and reading 7/4 and reading, you know, 3/8 and 13 and being able to get through it without really much of anything. I felt like such a strong sight reader. I was very confident sight reading in senior year. And I've never really gotten back to that level. I think I'm close, but I've never been to that where I felt that confident.
So now you're out of high school and you're moving to college, and I want to talk about on whether to go into music, because now this is a part of, we all know, of young people's lives, of deciding, you know, well, maybe this is something I want to do for a living. And talk about that transition. Yeah, that was a tough transition as well, because it was kind of the big fish in a small pond syndrome of Sandia. Because, you know, I talk about how big of a change it was from middle school to high school, but eventually I did outgrow that band program, to be honest, because you know, it was a good high school, and I learned everything I still learned from what I learned in high school I still use today. But my senior year, I think because I was in every band class. I was the typical band nerd. I was in every band class. I didn't care about grades. I only cared about band music. It was the only thing I looked forward to. Remember, this is a public podcast. We want to encourage kids to know that.
Well, you know, that's what I'm not saying I did the right thing. Right. I'm just saying that's what it was. You know.
Go ahead.
So I mean, that's how much I cared about music. I just lived and breathed. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to play my saxophone. I did not care about anything else at the time. But that came at a cost that I didn't realize at the end of senior year, where I burnt myself out, you know. I had a big solo that year. We call it the tank solo. For those who don't know, the tank solo is the name of the song, which was the intro music to an anime called Cowboy Bebop. Very iconic, one of the biggest animes to ever, you know, happen, and a really good one. And there's a famous saxophone solo on that intro that a lot of saxophone players have covered, and a lot of saxophone players have biffed, including myself, by the way, because it's incredibly difficult, and it's very, like the title, it's very beboppy,
Right,
and when you get into it, very difficult solo by Masato Honda, who I got to meet in Japan, but working on that solo burnt me out, and I didn't know how to play altissimo. Altissimo is an extended technique for saxophone that's very difficult when you're first learning how to do it. It wasn't coming easy to me. I grew up, I didn't have lessons growing up, so it was very much kind of fend for yourself. I was trying to figure it out on my own. YouTube wasn't even that old by that point, so there was YouTube was like a finite source at that time.
Right.
So there was only a couple, only a few saxophone videos on YouTube. I was trying to figure it out, and that process really burned me out. I had nailed it at the marching band competition, but I really felt like I was at the end of my rope, like I didn't want to do it anymore. So fast forward and graduate high school, and was still doing gigs in town.
Right.
But I didn't want to do music anymore. I was done. I said I didn't want to do music anymore. But ironically, I was still gigging around town because it was a good way. It was my first job, really. That was the best way to earn money was at the time was gigging around town and stuff. So I would still do it. I was majoring in psychology, like every person that comes out of high school. And but I loved psychology. I loved it. But eventually I came into contact with Mr. Rodney Bowe and Eric Jecklin, who's a bass player, both of them bass players that both of them UNM alumni, I believe. And they really talked me into going into the music program and really getting the proper education about it, and tying myself up there. I remember Rodney Bowe I had an open mic night, and we went up there and played up there, and afterwards Rodney Bowe kind of gave me the Rocky coach, talking to, and he basically told me, he was like, look, you're too talented to be doing this on the side. Either you're going to do this for real, or you're going to stop messing around. And he said that, but with a lot more cuss words. Don't leave it alone. And it made me really think. And I decided that it was worth going into. And that was a decision that changed my life forever, because who knows where I would have been going through psychology,
Yeah, right. So now you're going into college, and this is where a lot of some of our listeners may be able to parallel their lives with and their experiences in college. You majored in music ed or in performance? What was your major?
So I majored in jazz studies at first.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then was going through the program, and I'll be completely honest, I don't think I was a very strong saxophone player when I was going, at least relative to the people around me. I wasn't doing well in auditions, and my sight reading, contrary to exactly what I said before, that year after senior year of high school, it had really taken a toll on my sight reading, on my technique. I just came into UNM very, very rough, rough. I didn't have a good horn yet. I was still on my high school horn. Yeah. It was not a good, that first year was really, really, really tough. So, as I was going through jazz studies, of course they're making you learn piano. They're trying to, it's not as what do you want to say? Like, it's not as, it doesn't require as much as music ed in terms of playing a lot of different instruments, but they do want you to be able to be a lot more proficient in piano, which is standard across like the country. That's, that's standard stuff for jazz studies.
Right.
But I changed my major because I felt like I didn't have enough time. I was spending more time practicing on piano than I was on my axe, on my own horn.
Right, right.
So, and I didn't feel, and I was still doing rough in auditions. So I felt like I was at a crossroads in terms of, well, I'm not really a strong saxophone player. I'm spending a lot of time on piano. It's taking away from me getting to be a strong saxophone player. I would rather spend more time on my axe and improvising and technique to get better at saxophone than go on piano. So I changed my major. I had heard from other people who had done the same thing. I was by far not in the minority who've done this type of thing.
Sure.
People who have suggested, hey, you should go in a general music, get your Bachelor of Arts in general music, because you'll have more time to spend on practicing your axe. And that's exactly what happened. Like it was, I'm glad somebody told me that, because that's exactly what happened. I switched my major, and piano wasn't required of me, and I was able to really, really shed hard on saxophone.
Right.
And I needed that. This isn't to say this is what people should do, by no means, but I needed that because I didn't feel like I was keeping up with the saxophone studio at the time.
Right.
And I think it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because if I hadn't done that, I don't think I would be as strong of a player today.
Right.
You know.
So yeah, and the part of getting into your horn, and you're correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like that was an area where you started to really create a relationship with your instrument and connecting with your instrument.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
As an adult and moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you're really starting to make money with you. You know, I'm 19, 20, 21, and I'm finally starting to make like real money doing it. I'm starting to get in contact with bigger players in the community of Albuquerque, and they're taking a chance on you, and you know, it becomes more and more on the line as you get better. So, I definitely developed a relationship with the horn, but for those that don't know, my dad ended up giving me his horn, which was a professional horn, and I love that horn. Still have that horn to this day. I'll never get rid of it, but that horn just didn't fit me.
Right.
And my dad's heard me talk about this 1,000 times. And what I mean by that is literally and figuratively. That horn's a classical horn, which was good for UNM because it was a lot of classical. Most of my time was doing a lot of classical.
Sure.
And that horn whooped my butt because it was very punishing in terms of your technique. If you're a little bit off on that horn, it's gonna bite you. You're not gonna get it. You're gonna get a squeak. It's not gonna be clean.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was kind of a boot camp of of horn playing, and also didn't have the sound quality. Like I said, it was a classical horn, so it didn't fit my personality of how I improvise or the licks that I liked to play. It just wasn't a match to the type of player that I am. But it was the only horn that I had, so I had to make it work and go through the horn. But nevertheless, I did develop a relationship with it. I just didn't have a good one with it. So later on, I ended up finding a better horn in the Navy that works a little bit better.
You're out of college and you have to make a decision. And I often, on other episodes, a lot of the musicians go through the same thing of trying to decide of life. Life gets in the way. What you're going to do, and a lot of people that are listening to the podcast have gone past this in their life and are deciding whether or not they want to pick up their instrument again, play music again. And you were at this area, another crossroad on whether or not, are you going to go conventional with a job of some sort, or are you going to play for a living?
Right.
Talk about that area in your life, son.
Yeah, I mean, I knew once I went into, I knew once I was going to major in music and switch my majors that I was going to do a career in music, whether that was move to LA and do the starving musician thing and wait tables and have multiple jobs and make it happen, or the military. I knew the military was always an option, especially because of a family friend. Shout out to David Nansaway. You know, he had put the bug in my ear earlier,
Right.
about that possibility. So I knew one way or the other I was going to end up having a career in music. And to be honest, I was leaning towards doing the start of a musician route and move into a New York or an LA, probably LA for me because I'm more of a pop, player.
Uh,
Um, and and what really changed that was meeting Maggie, my wife, because she, she was still going through college, but I knew that I wanted to be with her
right.
for the rest of my life. So that was really, that was a big part in which way I was going to go in music. So I knew I was going to do music, but what kind of swayed me towards the military was, well, it's one thing if I want to be a starving artist. It's another thing if you want your girlfriend to be, a starving artist with
Right.
you. That's a whole different ask.
Sure.
Not that the military is a little ass either, but at least they're a little bit more taken care of
Right.
than being a starving musician. So,
Yeah.
so that's why I decided to go with the military, and I knew the military wasn't going to be a lifelong career,
Right.
which it turns out it's not for sure. I think if I hadn't met Maggie, I think I definitely probably would have tried to go out to LA, and who knows what would have happened. Maybe I would have failed and ended up, going into something else. But I would have at least given it a shot and say I gave it a shot.
Yeah. I look at it, the only way to fail is to not try.
Right.
So, otherwise you don't really know what the end result is. You have to try to find out. And if you have disappointing results, that's not a failure. You just learn from those and you move on. Talk about your experience. You went overseas.
Mm-hmm.
With the Navy, and talk about your experience and where you've played and
Mm-hmm.
bringing music to other parts of the world.
Yeah, I think it's been a life changing experience for sure. It's been I think I've had a unique experience in the Navy so far because I've seen the best of what the job can be and I've seen the worst of
Mhm.
what the job can be. And I don't think people who have retired and been in can't even say that. So
Mhm.
even if they try to.
Mhm.
So for me, I got to achieve my dream being in the Navy. When I was even sixth grade as a saxophone player beginning, I knew that I wanted to be a professional saxophone player. I remember when in one of my classes they said, of course there was typical thing of like, what do you want to do when you grow up? In
Mhm.
professionals, it was like 1, 2, and 3s, like make up, come up with 3 options. And I came up with one. It was just become a professional saxophone player. I didn't put anything else down.
Right, right.
And so I knew I wanted to travel the world. And I've never had the big dreams of like being some type of celebrity or anything like that. I did, but I knew that I wanted to do it at the highest possible level and travel the world and leave a tiny, very modest musical impact, the biggest musical impact that I could possibly make as
Mhm.
a saxophone player. And because of the Navy, to be fair, that's exactly what I've been able to do.
Right.
Through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of all of those, I was able to do that in Japan. And they're some of the biggest, the best moments of my musical career, being able to leave a big impact for somebody like me to be able to make there.
Uh,
So that was very fulfilling to be able to do that.
sure.
And if that's for like you're talking about for people who are listening, who that might be an option. That is a possibility that can happen to you, but it's all
Mhm.
in the fine print as well, because
Right.
there's
Right.
plenty of musicians that have never been overseas, and that's kind of the majority of them, to be honest. Who haven't been overseas or haven't done a deployment.
Sure.
Because of our nature, we're kind of a specialized rate, so
Mhm.
we're more shore duty, as they say.
Right.
So I had a unique experience in being able to do a lot of that. So it's not guaranteed that if you join, you're going to be able to do that. It's very inconsistent depending on where they station you and the processes and how
Yeah.
that stuff type of works.
And the decision is in someone else's hands.
Always,
Yeah,
always,
yeah.
always.
So you alluded to music and the connection to your audience. Talk about that feeling that you get when you're on stage and you
Mhm.
see your audience and they're enjoying what you're doing and you're communicating what you're feeling through this inanimate object that we call a sax, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's why we do it, right? I mean, at least that's what I believe. Why we should be doing it. But it's also complicated because I would say I'm just, and I say just now, but just now being probably, since I've been in the, well, a little bit longer than I've been in the Navy, maybe 6 or 7 years, that I like start learning the entertainment factor, because that's really what you're talking about when you're talking
Right.
about connecting with the audience. Because there were times in college, you're in an academic setting. I went to UNM, and you're learning so much information that I, for the life of me, could not absorb. Like I had a really hard time in college. I'm still learning things I learned in college just now,
Yeah.
because I'm a slow learner. But I'm trying to apply all these academic techniques, and I'm trying to
Right.
apply what I learned from improv into this solo, or I'm trying,
Yeah.
and you're very technique, academia is very technique oriented. It's very fundamentals, oriented. It's very
Sure.
technical. It's like super technical.
You're trying to get your tool find.
Right. And, there's other schools, of course, that are around the country that
Yeah.
frankly do a better job of teaching you about the entertainment aspect of it.
Yeah.
That I think UNM could learn a lot from. But
Yeah.
through my experience, I remember having a lot of performances, and shout out to Rodney Bowe, because he was the one that first taught me this, and I've kind of taken off from it since then. I had a lot of performances before Rodney Bowe where I would feel like I did an incredible solo, but the crowd wasn't really feeling it. Like they thought it sounded good,
Yeah.
but there was a disconnect in what you're talking about of like the audience where I'd be like, I know I just smashed that solo.
Right.
And I'm not getting the same reaction as maybe this other person.
You're not getting
do as good of a
feedback.
solo. Right.
Yeah.
Or, the energy just isn't there,
Sure.
So what I learned over time, like I said, shout out to Rodney Bowe, was the entertainment factor. And even Mr. North was, I think, trying to teach us this, but it wasn't connected with me even back in high school.
Right.
You learn when you learn, I guess, Rodney Bowe taught me of like, he would push me out into the audience when I would be soloing. He would, if I was soloing, he would come and be like, I remember one time I was soloing and I was killing it. We were playing just some jazz standards we were playing Flashlight by Parliament, right? That was one of our standards. We'd be playing it, and I had a big solo. He would let me rip on it. And I would be ripping on it. And by the end of the night, I'd feel so good and satisfied. I'd be like, man, that was one of my best solos. And Rodney Bowe would come up and he'd be like, look, anybody can do that. Like, you're a saxophone player. Anybody can, you're a dime a dozen. And he didn't mean that in a disrespectful way. He just was like, there's crazy saxophone players on this planet from all different walks of life. Like, they can all do what you can do.
Right.
What they can't do, what a lot of them can't do, is be entertaining when they're playing the same stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And that kind of opened my mind to like, oh, there's another aspect to this that I'm missing. That I think a lot of even pop players, but especially like straight ahead jazz players and stuff, they don't even think about this type of thing because straight ahead jazz doesn't really require that, right?
Right.
So as time went on, I was like, you know what, I need to nurture this, and I would take hip hop dance classes, or I would learn learning how to sell what I'm playing. There's a different aspect of not just playing a great solo, but selling that it's a great solo, emoting with it, and connecting with the audience that you're doing more than just blowing air through a horn. This horn is a part of yourself, and I'm going to show how this horn is a part of myself as I'm playing, rather than me just blowing a whole bunch of notes through the horn. And that was a big mind-blowing experience, because I was able to express myself in a completely different way. Sure. And it made me a lot more unique. And I started getting hired a lot more. And I started getting a lot more jobs and, around town and stuff like that, because I wasn't just playing as good, or maybe not even quite as good as a saxophone player that they had, but the entertainment factor was so much higher.
Right.
That I blew them out of the water, you know.
It fed the crowd.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I've always taken that with me, you know.
We dabbled with you going to Japan, and I have a clip here of you playing. Why don't I play a little bit of it? I'll bring the volume down, and you can narrate over a little bit of what we're listening to.
Okay.
All right.
Check this out, bro.
So talk a little bit about what we're listening.
Yeah, so that was a cover that we did of Wilton Felder's Way Back Home. And I got to shout out James Choate. He was a big part of why that project went so well, why it was so different than a lot of the other projects that were coming out. We did that as a tribute to, you know, Black History Month. And I felt like it was a really classy way of doing it. But that solo in particular, I was really blessed to have that solo because at the time, it was about a year away from coming back to the States. My contract was coming up, and I was about a year away. And frankly, I was sick of being away from home. So, you know, I was very homesick. And I felt like that song, especially the way that we arranged it, allowed me to kind of use that song as a vehicle to express my want for coming back home, you know. Because for those that don't know, I had a dope childhood. Like, I can't complain. I love my family. I had a great upbringing. We didn't have the most money in the world. Both of my parents were educators, so you know how that is. So we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but we were super happy growing up, and we were always a very, very close family that got even closer as we grew up. So leaving that and very abruptly and going to Japan, which is damn near as far away you can go, was really, really tough. And I was very homesick. And so I use that solo is very, there's a lot of scoops and, you know, kind of long notes and a lot of it's not the most technical solo in the world, but that was on purpose because, and I remember thinking about, well, what do I want to go technical and kind of throw a lot of, you know, throw a substitution in here and, you know, do, you know, stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to bother. I just feel like emoting on this song. So that song is really me screaming through my horn. That's the way I think about it, you know, screaming through my horn.
Your emotions.
Right. That I want to come home. There's a part in there later on where I'm playing in high altissimo and I'm just, you know, it's very, you know, long notes that I'm bending and screaming through my horn. Yeah. So I felt like it resonated with it because that was one of the biggest videos that the music program in the Navy has ever put out, if you ask me. Yeah. I think it came across the way that I wanted it to.
Cool.
You know?
Cool. So talk to us now about, well, first of all, what kind of music do you like, Jared?
Well, I know everybody says
you're listening to.
Yeah, I mean, everybody says this, but I really mean it. Like, I really mean it. If you listen to my playlist, it's not going to be very enjoyable because one song will be R&B, the next one will be classic rock, and the one after that will be metal. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
I listen to any type of genre I can get my hands on, because I also feel like as a musician, it's my job to try to be able to change colors to whatever genre I should be able to play.
Sure.
So part of that is listening, but right now, I've been trying to go back to my roots of trying to listen to more hip hop and pop stuff. old school stuff. I've been going back and listening. I've been listening to a lot of old school stuff right now.
Okay.
A lot of Bobby Brown and Anita Baker and Earth, Wind and Fire. I've been going back and listening to that because for the longest time I was listening to I was trying to push myself to listen to stuff I hadn't listened to. And to be honest, what I don't listen to a lot is bebop.
Yeah.
So a long time in Japan I was listening to a lot of like Phil Woods and Bill Waltris and Lester Young and was trying to develop my ear in bebop, which did help a lot. So recently I've been trying to get back into like pop and listening to like Brass Tracks was one of the hot bands out right now. Polyphia is a really hot band right now. They just came out with a new album. That's the group I sent you a while back.
Right. Did hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of hip hop and pop that I've been trying to get back into, and because that's where I started. And I've been kind of away from that, trying to stretch myself in different genres. So I think I need to go back to learn where I come from a little bit recently.
All right. I feel you on that. So speaking about going back, where do you see yourself going forward to now? You're still in the Navy, a couple of years to go.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself if you could talk to your future Jared in the next few years? Where do you see yourself going in the future? And does music still play a place in your life with that?
No matter what I decide, music will always be a big part of my life. That's for sure. What way it plays a part is what's in question right now, and all possibilities are open. I feel like, going back to the question, I kind of feel like I did in high school, of just being burnt out. It's been a long journey, and I've gotten to do what I set out to do as a musician. So it's been pretty disorienting trying to figure out where to go next. I met some unbelievably good musicians since being in the Navy, and they're trying to keep me playing, but I'll be completely transparent. It's a possibility that I won't play saxophone after I get out and move on to something else and kind of close this chapter of being a professional musician out in my life and move on to something else. Because part of me feels like I've hit the glass ceiling, because the music industry, it goes on to a bigger, get into the weeds. It's easy to get into the weeds about this type of stuff because what we're really talking about is the music industry. So, and there's a lot of world-class, unbelievable saxophone players that are fighting for very few opportunities that are out there in the world. And I'm not ignorant to that fact. Sure. So I am definitely entertaining, and it's a good possibility that when I get out, I'm not going to play saxophone anymore. And music will still play a part of my life, for sure, of course. Right. But it won't be the main focus. It will be enjoying it in a completely different way. It won't be an active thing that I'm participating in. So I'm entertaining that, and then of course I'm entertaining the possibilities within music, whether that's teaching. I've been thinking about music therapy, although that field seems still like it's developing a lot. Right. So I don't know. My relationship with music right now is pretty rough, I'll be honest. We joke in the music world about music being a relationship, a partner relationship, just like your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's pretty accurate. And I would say to continue with that analogy, I think me and music are on the verge of having a divorce right now. So, maybe we need to go see therapy or something. But
on the other episodes, we've talked about people that have had that rocky road with music, whether life gets in the way, or they've had a director or a teacher that steered them in a different direction, and they let it go. But for my personal life, it's always when I've let my horn go or stop playing for whatever reason, it's always drawn me back. I don't play at your caliber or some of the others that have been on the episode, but other people that have had similar feelings when they've put down their instrument, whether it's been through high school or college, or even when they're in their own profession, being a doctor and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, man, as your father has seen, and your mom, your parents have seen you go through this journey, neither one of us, your mom or myself, can see you moving on in your life without that sax in your DNA, that saxophone in your
That's
DNA.
what everybody keeps telling me.
And you can try to deny that element of your being, but that's better than trying to no way of trying to deny your right arm or your the rest of your limbs. So the future is open wide, and one thing you've demonstrated over your life is that you are going to be successful in anything you do, because when you put your mind to it, has been the outcome. So we're just looking to see the next chapter. Leave the listeners with and probably yourself with an inspiration of why they should continue playing music. Why do you think you and the listeners should continue to go back or pick up an instrument they haven't done before, or keep playing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's what's tough about it, right? Because it's a balance of playing for other people, but you also need to be able to play for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to be getting something out of it as well. So
Yeah.
that's always the balance that I think a lot of musicians, no matter what level you are, I don't care
Right.
if you're, John Coltrane, he struggled with it too.
Yeah.
Of
Or
playing
playing
for
hot cross buns.
yeah, or first playing, hot cross buns for the first time is, what are you getting out of it versus what other people are getting out of it.
Right.
If you're playing and you're not getting a lot out of it, and it's kind of a whatever thing for you, then it's probably not for you. I was that way with sports. I've never been an athlete.
Right.
I don't get,
Yeah.
sports just doesn't talk to me. I've tried before, I've tried track and football and stuff like that, and they're gonna have fun, but it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't speak to me like
Right.
a lot of the high school kids at the time and stuff like that. But music is the same way. So if you have to be honest with yourself, I think first comes you, because without you, it doesn't matter if you're connected to the audience or not. If you're not enjoying it, if you're enjoying it, then that's all the reason that you need.
Yeah.
If you play for yourself, I think that's the number one reason.
Right.
And that's all the reason that you need to keep playing. You don't have to be the best player. You don't have to be the most technical. You don't have to. There's plenty of people. Shout out to my friend Eli. He plays a little bit of guitar, but he's not a musician. He'll tell you himself. But he knows more about music history than I do.
Right.
Because he's such a fan of albums, and there's a lot of people like that don't play an instrument at all, and they support the scene, and they
Sure.
are really big, just big fans about it, that they might as well be musicians. In some ways, they're more musicians than people who are actually playing,
Right. Yeah.
So for me, that's what I'm trying to balance, because what I get most out of it, I practice. I don't get, I practice and I enjoy practicing, but I don't. If I was just practicing for the rest of my life, I wouldn't. That's not good enough for me. The payoff is playing for other people. That's what fills my cup and that type of thing. So that's what drives me, is what's driven me to get to the high level that I'm at right now.
Right.
But that's also the double-edged sword that keeps me from deciding whether I want to do this in the future, because it's hard to do that, frankly, especially as an instrumentalist. It's hard no matter what you do, but it's a little bit easier if you're a vocalist or you're a rapper.
Yeah.
Or you're, you know what I mean? They tend to have a lot better luck than the saxophone players. So I don't know what my future holds, but if I do get to continue playing music, it's gonna have to be at a higher level than this. That's just me. If I continue playing music at a professional level, we're gonna have to push to that next level of some kind.
Yeah.
And that's real tough. That's real tough.
Well, we will watch you and hold your hand and continue to love you, and everybody enjoys seeing you playing and making that connection. I want to
shout
thank
out to Albuquerque and everybody who supported me. I see you guys. So thank you.
I want to thank you so much, son, for doing this. I know you've been busy. And I want to thank the listeners for downloading the podcast. Again, this has been OTP on the podium with Jared Goodrum. And we want to thank you all for taking the time and listening. Go out and play all the right notes.
You've been listening to The Podium. If you would like to be a guest on The Podium, email the show at onthe-podium2@gmail.com. That's ONTHEPODIUM TOO @gmail.com.